And we're back. Kelly Gunnerman, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Neil. Thank you very much, sir.
I'm doing well too. Thanks for asking. It's Monday. It's Brokers Babble. You look different than Brian York.
A little bit older. I'm an older guy.
Thanks for filling in. Brian was off doing who knows what. He's a busy business broker, so I'm glad you could fill in. And you were last time you were on. You were our guest here on Brokers Babble. So you're a co-hosting today, and I'm excited to bring Andrew on a little bit. As we like to do, I like to do a little bit of a show opening here. We'll give ourselves an introduction. Let's get into that. Who the heck are you, Kelly? Tell me about you. Give me the overview. Make it short.
I've been called a serial entrepreneur. Bought and sold several businesses, probably 8 or 9 over the years, and now a business broker with VR Business Brokers. So right here in Raleigh. So
nice.
The short answer.
No, I like that. You could have made it longer than that, but I appreciate that. And I'm Neil Isaacs. We sell other people's businesses. This is my second business, I think. My first business, I never told you this, Kelly, it was called Tanks a Lot. And it was aquarium maintenance when I was in college at Clemson University. So nice. I don't know the official number of businesses. I've only had 2 substantial businesses, but I've sold a lot of them. So it's fun to help other people in their journey. So
yeah, that's really the best part of this job is helping people find their next step.
Next step, I agree. And that takes us right to our quick tip. And as I like to do, I've got a video to play. So I'll play this short video and then we'll talk about it. This is the question that every seller wants to know. Well, I'm an intermediary and I suffer the daggers of buyer arrows in my back every single day. And I can tell you what buyers want. Buyers want 3 things. They want people, processes, and profit. They're looking for all those things. And they're also looking for a business and an industry that is sustainable, that's growing. They're not looking for businesses in declining industry. They're looking for recurring revenue and a lack of customer concentration. If you have all of those things, you may have a business that business buyers want, but you got to get through the process. There's a whole series of things that you have to do to find your buyer, to position it above the other businesses that are for sale, and then to get the deal that you want with the deal structure that you want and get it closed. All right. Well, that's our quick tip. And it's just, I'm excited to bring Andrew on soon because we're going to get into, SBA financing. And I guarantee the stuff that was geared for business owners. What are they looking for? They want to sell their business. What do buyers want? But bankers want the same thing, right?
Right. They're always looking for, is it making money? That's kind of
Is it making money?
Is there history? Are they making money? So it's.
How many folks have you talked to as a business broker that have been like, I don't make money, but
there's potential. Yeah.
There's potential.
Yeah. It's tough to sell potential and tough to get a bank to bite on potential also.
Yeah. So the 3 Ps, if owners are thinking about what do people look for to sell a business or to buy a business, people, profit, and processes is about as simple as I can make it.
And potential is not one of the Ps. So.
It's not. There's a 4th P though, and it's price. Because I meet people all the time. They've got the 3 Ps, but they want too much for it.
Wow.
So, they can ask for it, but doesn't mean it's going to sell. So, well, that was fun for our quick tip. Let's get into our next agenda item here. We always like to showcase a deal of the week, and this one is Rory's. So I will share kind of the highlight here. This is a really cool one. I'd have to have you sign an NDA to give you the full book on this one, but it's a downtown specialty beverage shop and cafe. It is a must-see location. It makes money. The owners don't spend a lot of time there. And it's got a cool patio space too. So rarely do we see such cool downtown restaurant properties that are of a going concern. So I'm excited. If you're a restaurateur, you're looking for your next spot, or even better, you're looking for a full turnkey operation. I can put the link. I'll put the link in the thread here, and then you can click through. But it's on all of our properties. fill out the NDA, and we'll get you. Rory will call you and tell you all about that one. So that's our deal of the week. Kelly, you got anything else before we get into our guests that we're going to bring on?
Anxious to talk more about SBA. I think Andrew's going to be a great guest, and looking forward to hearing more about what he has to say about SBA and interest rates and all the other things that he can help us out with.
I agree. So without ado, I'll give my introduction about Andrew. Andrew and I have done several deals together. I find him to be very responsive. That's one reason. That's when I look for other professionals to work with. I'm like, are they going to return my calls? Are they going to give good advice? Are they going to be on the deal team to get the deal done? So I would say that's correct. For all of those things are correct for Andrew. I've actually worked with Andrew at 2 banks now, and so I've kind of seen his path as he's closed more and more SBA deals, and he's very reliable, and he's a good person too. I've met his family, and it's nothing better than to work with a true professional that's a great family person too.
He also has some entrepreneurial side to him.
He does. He's a business owner as well,
which gives him a little bit different point of view, I think, for what the owners are going through. Both the owners and the seller, owners and buyers are going through in the process.
I agree. And with that, welcome to Brokers Babble, Andrew Wheeler. How are you today?
I'm doing good, Neal, Kelly. Thank you all for having me.
Hey, Andrew. Good to see you.
You bet. Well,
see y'all.
Andrew, I want to invite you to share anything more about you.
Well, I think, as you said, I'm a SBA lender with Bank of Oak Ridge. I reside here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've lived in North Carolina my whole life. I'm an NC State guy. Have been doing SBA for about 6 years now. I've been in commercial lending or commercial banking for about 20. But I do own a small business myself, real estate investor, and just enjoy what I get to do every day, which is usually something different because every deal is different, every buyer is different, every seller is different. So I just enjoy the constant change.
Constant change is right, especially with SBA. I mean, I know Kelly's itching to get into all the changes. I'm gonna pause that for now. Maybe if we get to the basics of SBA, we'll work up to whatever changes happened last week or or next week. But let's back it up a little bit. Like SBA loans, you got FHA, SBA. You got so many different types. HELOCs. Like, where does SBA fit in? What are they best for? Who needs an SBA loan?
Well, I mean, Neal, I think ultimately when it comes down to it, I think SBA loans are best for helping that person hopefully achieve their goal or dream that may not be possible without funding like SBA. Not everyone can qualify for SBA. And there's been some rule changes recently that have altered that a little bit as well. But traditionally speaking, if you had other means, SBA may not be the best fit for you. And that could be just as simple as if someone has a HELOC in place, that might be a better vehicle for them. Yeah. It may not be too, but that's part of my job. And Neal, I think you referenced, working with me for a while now. I think, if I recall, one of the first things that you liked about me was that I didn't necessarily force somebody into an SBA loan. If they had an option for a HELOC and that worked, then, hey, if that's the best fit and you're comfortable with it, I'm gonna try to give the best advice I can.
Yeah. And while you're talking about that, could you let everybody know what the acronyms are for some of those loans, like HELOC and SBA? I think some folks may not know what all of those initials stand for.
Yeah, great point, Kelly. Yeah, well, SBA stands for Small Business Administration. That's a government guaranteed program that's been around for, as of this year, 70 years. So it's been out there for a long time. It helps people achieve that entrepreneur, small business ownership dream. So that's SBA, Small Business Administration. HELOC, which is HELOC, stands for Home Equity Line of Credit. Meaning if you have owned a home for a while, you have some equity built into that property, you can sometimes tap that equity, use that equity through either a loan or a line of credit, depending on appraised value. So I think those are two of the acronyms that were thrown around there.
Yeah, and then an important point there is when we're exploring like what's the best financing vehicle, a lot of people don't have the equity in their home to pull out. Like they may not have the collateral. And I think SBA is the goodwill loan. Like we're trying to sell businesses that make money, but we don't have hard assets to lean against. And that's where it's kind of the gold standard for small business loans, if we have the finances to support that.
Yeah, I think one of the large premises around SBA initially was helping people get access to funding that they otherwise wouldn't have. If you're a quote unquote certified rich person, you have other means, then you can sometimes dictate what you can do. Perhaps further your own goodwill or better your own self by using some of those assets and means to buy another business, buy another piece of real estate. Whereas folks that don't have those means, or perhaps weren't fortunate enough to grow up in this family or to make this type of money, they need other options sometimes. And SBA kind of fills that void and was designed to really help incentivize banks and lending institutions to offer that funding, which, to your point, Neil, is in a lot of cases, or many cases, somewhat at least unsecured or uncollateralized, meaning we don't always have hard collateral for some or all of our loan amount. And the government guaranteed portion of the SBA loan is what it kind of incentivizes a bank like mine or many others to take the risk of that loan, if you will.
Yeah.
What are some of the things? Obviously, if you're buying a business, profitability of the business you're buying is going to be a big influencer on being able to secure an SBA loan. But what other things are banks looking for? Line of credit or your credit score, or other things that you may be looking for?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of little, I started to say intangible items, but there's a lot of things that we look for when we're doing any deal. Obviously, particularly for business acquisitions or really for anything, we want cash flow to be sufficient, because that dictates how we get repaid ultimately. And if we can't get repaid, then we're taking way too much risk. So cash flow, then certainly, which is for me is right up there, and in some cases maybe even a little bit more important than cash flow, is that buyer or borrower's experience. What experience do they have? Have they worked in this industry? Have they managed people? And there's certainly a lot of skill sets, backgrounds, education, that are what we would call transferable skill sets. So you don't necessarily have to work in the widget factory to be able to own a widget company, but we like for there to be some background or history or education or something that would give us at least a good enough feeling about you as a buyer in the case of that business acquisition. But experience, cash flow, personal credit history, that is certainly a factor, because if you've had issues in repaying others, then that's something we have to take into account for when we're trying to assist you with a loan. And we can help people with various backgrounds or delinquencies or pasts that maybe that person's not terribly proud of or happy about, but it's all part of the big equation.
That's an important part that I haven't figured out a good way to get around is, I mean, when I'm talking to buyers, I have to be like, by the way, are you a felon? Like that's a tough question to ask, but I've gotten pretty far down some roads, and then they'll be like, oh, does that, battery charge, is that going to be a problem? Like, that's a real deal. This is a government loan, and people are going to find out about your personal history. So there's a lot of boxes to check. We actually did institute a new form that asks people that, like, if you're going to do SBA, let's make sure you don't have a bankruptcy. Like, let's disclose it early so that we know what we're working with.
Yeah, I mean, I think if nothing else, disclosing, just being honest, right? I mean, because what people tend to forget about is we view this entire process, and I say we, any lender, particularly on the credit side, when we're reviewing a loan request, I mean, every little thing that happens or doesn't happen is some sign of that person's character, right?
Yeah.
And so if you are hiding something, albeit you might be just embarrassed, ashamed, and I call a lot of these things are young and dumb, right? I did this 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I was in college. I was in high school. I was young and dumb. Most of those things we can generally work with. Now, if it was last fall, hard to get around, hard to say that's young and dumb. But be honest, because even if I can't help you, I'd rather not go through the whole process with everyone. I'd rather we find out about it early or say, hey, this is just not for us, and here's why. Maybe XYZ lender is comfortable with these things, or here's a path that you can pursue over the next period of time to either clean your credit up, perhaps work with an attorney to clear up a criminal type of history. Just being honest. And I'll tell you too, the few times that I've seen where somebody will not sign that form or answer that question, Neil, as you said a second ago, almost every time it's, oh, well, yeah, I didn't want to tell you about that DUI I had. And we'd rather know about it sooner for everyone's sake.
Yeah.
So
well, I want to look at it a different angle. We're talking about the buyer side, but I literally today had a seller say, well, how's this going to affect our deal, Neil? Like, we got a bunch of buyers. Some want to do SBA, some want to pay all cash. How's that going to affect me, the seller? What advice do you have for business owners? Because it's you. Let's be clear. You represent the buyer, right? The buyer's your customer.
Yeah.
And then they're in a contract with a seller. What can a seller expect to have to provide, or just their involvement in the buyer's deal on the SBA side?
Yeah, I mean, well, every transaction is a little different. Some sellers get pretty involved, some don't really at all. Assuming either you as the broker or our borrower has gathered the appropriate financial information, we don't have to get into the weeds much with sellers. There might be a few additional questions or some additional schedules or documents or financials that we need to update our file. And as we get into a business acquisition, we do need a seller to allow us or sign off on us getting tax transcripts, simply so that we can verify that what was given to us was what was filed with the IRS.
Wait a minute. You're saying people actually make up tax returns?
Neil, I'll knock on wood. I haven't personally seen that. I don't think. But
they certainly never make up a P&L or anything like that.
We have seen things where the government might have screwed stuff up and the tax returns didn't match when nobody did anything.
You're right. And probably to your point, and I'm not picking on the government or IRS or anybody. I've seen more errors, I think, with the IRS than I have from a seller's, being dishonest or committing fraud most sellers are pretty honest. Yeah. I mean, and even, just also being the IRS, imagine having to, record and document the millions upon millions of tax returns they get every year. So it's a daunting task for them too. But
so staying on this question, and Kelly, I know you have a question, but the seller can expect to share their transcripts, so they need to share their tax. What about like when you get closer to the end, like this 90-day thing? Like, you guys always want updated financials. How does that work? Like, for the seller always getting new financials towards the end?
Well, if a deal goes smoothly start to finish, then hopefully we don't have to ask for anything updated. But if it drags its feet for whatever reason or whoever fault that might be, then we typically like to have financials prior to closing that are within 90 days. And that's really just so we can hopefully document and assure that nothing has negatively impacted the business. And that's for our protection as a lender, but for the buyer's protection as well. But yeah, so that comes up from time to time. A seller, to your question, a seller should have an attorney assisting them, representing them in this type of transaction, just to help facilitate some of the legal documents in the transaction itself, the asset purchase agreement or stock purchase agreement. Those are, just a few of the things, but a seller, depending on the business, depending on what they're trying to do, they might have other options in front of them. Just because a buyer needs SBA financing, that doesn't, in my mind, doesn't necessarily make them a weaker buyer or not as desirable of a buyer. It just means that they have another partner in this transaction to hopefully reach that goal. Because the bank oftentimes gets blamed as the bad guy in these transactions, but I can tell you, once we get involved in a deal, we want to see it closed just as much as everybody. But on the flip side of that is we're taking the ongoing risk of the transaction too.
Right.
If a seller is providing financing, then they're taking some ongoing risk as well. But that's probably for 10%, 15%, 20%. We're taking the 80, 90 or more percent of the risk. And no offense to business brokers either, y'all are transactional. You want to see the deal consummate and then you're out. So we're the ones that have need to have that long-term buy-in. So of course our process will be a little more intense, a little more scrutinized, but hopefully at the end of the day, we all want to get to that same goal, which is closing.
So with that, if someone came to you today with a deal, how long is a typical, if there is a typical amount of time to get from, hey, Andrew, I want to buy this business, to your SBA approved? Is there any typical time frame?
Well, I generally will tell people if all parties are involved and are doing what they need to do, we can get start to finish in 45 to 60 days. Now, to your question about getting them approved, once I get everything from a borrower, and assuming I have everything from the business or the seller financial wise, then I can have a deal underwritten and approved. For us, it's 7 to 10 days. We can move faster. It could be a little slower depending on volume. I don't sit here and claim to ever be the fastest or this or that. I just try to be as honest as I can. But every deal is different, Kelly, and I get asked that question all the time. I'm Neal, I think, is very familiar with a transaction that was very unique to me and took a lot more time than I think a lot of us felt like it should have. And it was really due to the buyer taking more time than any other that I've seen. And I can't control that. Other than maybe pulling the plug on the deal. We're at the mercy of
others. And the lease is a big deal. I see a lot of them get pushed back because the landlords take forever. And that's worth mentioning, that a lot of times, you got the buyer and the seller, and you got the buyer and the bank, and then you got the buyer and the landlord, and all that stuff has got to kind of line up.
We're dealing with a lot of our landlords are national, if not global entities, and they've got requirements and attorneys and different parties that they have to get involved. We have buyer and seller transactional attorneys in most cases. We have at least one broker involved in nearly every transaction. We have to get third-party reports, business valuations, appraisals. Those folks need information from somebody. There's just so many. Life insurance is another thing that is required on many of the transactions that we do. And you can work with one insurance agent and they can have it turned around in 48 hours.
Yes.
You can work with another and at best it's 48 days.
Yeah.
So there's just so many moving parts that every transaction is different. And a lot of those parts are nobody's fault. It's just the nature of the deal. But the earlier we can all realize that, identify it, like on that same transaction that I just mentioned, the identifying a hurdle around the lease was one of the first things that was brought to my attention by the broker. So we knew about it, and that was one of the first things we tried to massage before we got further into it.
Well, what about, Kelly was asking about all these acronyms. What about this, buyers out there, and you've talked about getting pre-approved. It's kind of a two-part question. Like, when should they reach out to you and get pre-approved? What does that look like? Because we have people come to us all the time. We say, have you talked to a banker? Like, what could a buyer expect if they were, do you want people to go to you before they buy the business? Just talk to us about like business buyers and getting ready to get an SBA loan.
Well, yeah, and I do get a lot of people that ask me that same question. I tell people it's a little bit different with SBA. It's not quite like buying a house, right? If I have a salary and I make $75,000 a year, a mortgage lender can pull your credit and pretty much pencil in what your debt income is and tell you, look, assuming rates stay here, you can buy a house up to $450,000. Great. I know what I can go do. Buying a business is not like buying a house. Unless you are just very focused in on what niche or industry that you really want to target. But most of the folks like that come to us and say, I'm just looking to buy a business. It might be a landscaping business. It might be a hair salon, or it might be a restaurant. And every one of those scenarios is going to be different. And what I tell people all the time is, for every transaction, we have to underwrite on a business acquisition. Every transaction, we have to underwrite two sides. I've got the seller, who I have to understand their business, their financials, and then I have a buyer. And both are different. In some cases, I might love the buyer, hate the business, or vice versa. And so it's we have to kind of manage that and work through that process as well.
And the second part of my question, looking the other way, if you are a buyer and you're shopping for an SBA banker or broker, or you're looking for SBA, I hear a lot of SBA folks being like, we're PLP approved. Talk to us about what to look for when these buyers are shopping for an Andrew Wheeler type.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I'll try to back up a little bit as well and touch on what you asked about a second ago. I kind of rambled on, but for what they should look for, what I think they should look for in a lender is really just someone that they feel has certainty that they can get that loan approved. A lot of people, like you're right, we talk about we're a preferred lender with the SBA or certainty to close. All those or both of those are important, but I really look at certainty to get it approved. Because just because I can get it approved, it's different than closing. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just I can control or I have a little better understanding of what I can control within my team, my financial institution. But when it gets to the landlord or the life insurance agent or the seller, I can't control those things. So that's where, for me, I tend to focus on, well, what I feel good about, what can I get approved? Neil, you come to me, you've been a business broker, you want to buy a manufacturing business. Like, well, okay, Neal, I know you got an MBA, you've owned your own business a couple of times now. You've got a lot of maybe not direct manufacturing experience per se, but you have small business ownership in a couple of different cases, a couple of different industries. You've got an educational background that's solid. You have some money to put into this transaction. I've verified that. Okay, Neal, I feel like we can get home on that. And that to me is the biggest part really of my job is trying to provide.
You have to tell that story. You're the matchmaker. You have to tell that story to the bank. I would imagine that this is going to work, that it is a fit. So that's where you're making those connections.
Yeah, and if I can't get buy into it, it really doesn't need to go any further because I mean that's the other part of it. We talk about like everybody wants to know how fast you can do this, how fast you can do this. Sometimes the best thing you can do is how fast can you tell me no.
Yeah, I'm in agreement.
Because once you know, hey, I'm not the right guy or girl. Yeah. Move on. And there might be another lender out there that does it every day and twice on Sunday, but this wasn't for me or for us for whatever reason. And sometimes that could be as simple as we got off on the wrong foot, or I think you lied to me. I mean,
different lenders have different appetites and probably different personal, people they work with better than others.
Well, and when you get into lending, when you've done lending long enough, and the sales folks, they're not usually as hung up on this, but the credit side, there's always somebody in credit that's like, oh, we lost money on a laundromat one time. I hate laundromats. We're never going to do a laundromat. And then Warren Buffett walks in the door and wants you to finance a laundromat. And you're like, this is a no-brainer. We need to do this laundromat. But there's always going to be personal preferences and historical issues. But back to your point or question, the two big things that I look for when I'm trying to pre-qual somebody is what is your background? What is your experience? Give me a resume. Let's talk through this. Let's talk about your work experience. And then it's what can you financially afford? And historically, a lot of that has been around down payment with SBA's historical down payment or proposed down payment of that 10% range. That's usually been a big benchmark in SBA. Hey, do you have the wherewithal to get that 10% mark? And if you don't, what are some other options available to you? The rules have changed recently to alter that a little bit, really in the buyer's favor. We're still really getting our arms around that, what our comfortability is going to be with that. But those are the two big things that I look for when I'm trying to help somebody.
Yeah, and I know Kelly was itching to get to new rules. I think Warren Buffett may actually be able to get an SBA loan with some of the new rules of them removing the cap. They used to be that people with too much money couldn't get an SBA loan, but maybe Warren Buffett, poor guy, he can finally get an SBA loan. Yeah,
there's you're right. There are some rules now with around personal financial wherewithal, I guess.
Yeah.
And that actually came up on a deal recently, last week for me. I'll admit I had to back down a little bit on my stance initially after doing a little more research, but but within that same conversation is well, okay, you have the means, but is SBA the right fit? And so you point them in, well, hey, you might still be able to do SBA. You're not disqualified for it. But what if you tried this? Could you get a mortgage on real estate at a better interest rate, at better terms, more flexibility? And that's just my background, me as a person, just trying to do what I feel is best for that person.
Yeah.
If that means I don't get a loan out of it, then that's okay too. I'd rather help somebody than not.
I think we're going to have to bring Andrew back for the new rules.
I do too. I've got your link.
New rules.
I've got your LinkedIn up on the page here, and I put it in the chat. So please connect with Andrew if you're watching, if you're a buyer, if you're a seller, all things SBA. Like I said, I've had great experience working with Andrew. We're almost out of time. I want to talk about next guest. Kelly, did you have anything else for?
Yeah, I'm good for now. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen. I will say next week we do have Mike Leanna coming on. We're going to talk about valuation. So be sure and check us out next week. It'll be 3:30 here on this channel, Facebook, LinkedIn. On Friday, we are doing our coffee event. So that'll be at our new location, Lorraine's in Garner. And that's from 9 a.m. till 10:30. It's just business owners and advisors. We buy the coffee, Chase, Breeden, and I, and we host the event. And I think we've got some other stuff coming up too. So check that out. I think we have those posted on our different profiles, Facebook and LinkedIn. Love to connect business owners. And that's all we got for today. So Kelly and Andrew, thank you for being a part of this. For you guys out there, thanks for watching. This is Neil Isaacs on behalf of Kelly and Andrew, signing off.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.